graduating class in the history of high school graduations was 2003. I've got one of the 14 2003 KHSAA State Wrestling Champions with us today. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nick Chaffin, graduate of Prestonsburg High School and state champion in the 119-pound weight class in 2003.
Now, you may know him as Dr. Nick Chaffin. I know him as Nick. He used to beat me up sometimes when we wrestled, him and his brother Heath. So, if he used to beat you up, you can call him by his non-doctor name. But Nick, man, thanks for being here today. You wrestled at Prestonsburg, and Prestonsburg is known more as a football school. The Black Cats, everybody knows the Black Cats. How did Prestonsburg wrestling get started? How did you get into wrestling?
So, Prestonsburg does not have a very long wrestling history like other schools such as Sheldon Clark, Johnson Central, Woodford County, Union County. I think the first year we had a program was in 1997 or 98 during my 7th grade year. At the time, middle school wrestling in the state was essentially non-existent other than having some programs throughout the state. We didn't have a state middle school tournament like we do today, but our high school program got started in 97 or 98 when I was in 7th grade, and Jim Matney of Sheldon Clark was very instrumental in getting the program started. He actually loaned our team its first wrestling mat. It was the definition or the quintessential loaner mat because it was loaned to Sheldon Clark when they got their program started, and then loaned to us when we had our program started. But
now, which mat was that? Because I think I remember it.
So it's the yellow or the purple and yellow mat.
I remember that mat. Yep.
And there's some debate on the origins of that mat. We believe based on the colors that it was probably from Gilbert High School in West Virginia because they did have a team and they were purple and yellow. So we figure that's probably where it came from. But so started off in 97 or 98. Our first head coach was Jerry Butcher, who was a graduate of Johnson Central High School. He wrestled and played football. And to my best memory, I think he was actually a 2-time All-State offensive or defensive lineman.
I can see that.
So he was a very talented football player, and he did wrestle. So he had some wrestling experience. He brought on some other Johnson Central or former Johnson Central wrestlers to help out. One of those was Rick Fannin, who was our coach from our time in middle school and through much of high school. And we had some other help from former wrestlers. Let's see, J.P. Dale.
Yep.
And
I think did Bobby.
So Bobby Van Hoos came down once or twice to wrestle. I think maybe my freshman or sophomore years, maybe junior year as well. But some limited action from him, and so we had a lot of help from surrounding programs. But like a lot of new programs, we started off really slow. And we wrestled a lot of local competition, Perry Central, Pike Central, Ashland. District 8 back then was essentially Region 8 now. But, we've had some changes in the lineup since then. But, yeah, Prestonsburg had some humble beginnings, practicing in church basements, on loaner mats, and very seldom filling a full team. We would go from 14 to 4 wrestlers in a week's notice.
I can believe that. And just real quick on the District 8, before the KHSAA realigned, the District 8 went all the way from Ashland down to Wayne, Whitley, McCreary County, and everything in between east of Lexington. So that was a big daggone district.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was essentially northeast Kentucky to south central Kentucky. And we traveled to Wayne County on several occasions for district tournaments and for regional tournaments. So it was not uncommon to be in Ashland one weekend and Wayne the next. So we traveled a lot.
I'll put, in case you're not familiar with the geography of Kentucky, you guys are seeing a map. Floyd County, where Prestonsburg's highlighted, and you got Ashland highlighted where they were, and then all the way down to Wayne County. So it was a pretty good bus trip. And the thing about wrestling is starting a program, it takes a village. It takes, like I said, getting a mat, getting a place to do it, getting people familiar with the sport. So if you're new to wrestling, we know a lot of teams, in especially in the eastern part of Kentucky, are starting up. don't be ashamed to reach out to people and hey, we need some help, we need some rules, we need this, that, or the other. Because trust me, we want to help you. We want to get the sport in as many schools as we possibly can. Just don't be too prideful to ask for help. So Nick, how did you find wrestling? How does a young Nick and Heath Chafin find wrestling?
So I actually remember the exact moment that I knew there was going to be a wrestling program at Prestonsburg, and it was in 7th grade at the preseason, the Big Sandy Valley Conference, the football conference, the preseason Gritorama, and it was in Inez that year.
Okay.
And my dad, who is a physician in Martin County, introduced me to Jim Matney for what I believe was the first time. And he showed me his state championship rings from the early 90s.
Yep.
So my dad introduces me to Jim Matney, and they were talking, and there was some interest to start a wrestling program. So it was at that preseason grid in 7th grade that I knew there was going to be a wrestling program. Now, growing up with a twin brother, we were always wrestling, and we were always fighting each other. And so there's always this innate urge or innate ability to at least grapple.
Yep.
But, there was not much of a foundation, but we were always, just fighting with one another. So I felt like wrestling kind of came naturally to us. So even though we didn't have a middle school team, we had this new high school team, and my dad made sure that we were going to be participating. And this was based solely on the fact that he had experience with the wrestlers at Sheldon Clark and with Coach Matney. So he felt like it'd be a good fit for us.
And if you're not familiar, Sheldon Clark wrestling in the 90s was one of the top programs in the entire state. Back-to-back team state titles, 94, 95. A multitude of individual state champions. Chris Goss was the first, all the way up through, Josh Stepp, Joey Stepp in 1999. Anywhere in between, Sheldon Clark wrestling was always represented top 5 at least as team placement, and at least 1 or 2 in the finals, if not more. So Coach Matney was a good foundation, or a good way to get, everybody into the sport. And the thing about Jim is he had that magnetic ability to draw people in to, whether it was football, wrestling, whatever it was, people just wanted to be around and be a part of it. So I can see Coach Jim getting a good foundation for you guys. So let's kind of talk about, you're in high school, you're wrestling. How does your freshman year go? Talk us through your freshman year.
Okay, so before we get to my freshman year, I would like to talk about my 7th and 8th grade years.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was a terrible wrestler. In 7th grade, I'm pretty sure I might not have even won a single match. And that's probably the truth. I was not very good. Now, my twin brother, Heath, he picked up on real wrestling a little quicker than I did. So going into 8th grade, I'd improved a lot. I think we might have went to a camp after 7th grade. But I entered my 8th grade year with higher expectations, and those higher expectations were not met. I probably lost. I might have had a 50-50 record, maybe a little better than a 50-50 record, whereas my twin brother won 30-plus matches and
Get out.
Low single-digit losses, had a lot of big wins in middle school, and I had most opposing teams wanting to wrestle me as opposed to wrestle my brother. In fact, one of the lowlights of my middle school career was weighing in at a tournament in North Carolina, and I heard some kids in the background going, "I hope I wrestle him. He's chubby." So that was demoralizing at the time, but it was actually the motivation I needed, because that summer I started lifting weights more serious. I started doing push-ups and sit-ups at home, and I had a nice physique transformation from my 8th grade to freshman year. So going into my freshman year, my brother and I were both still wrestling, and my brother had a great middle school season. So going into high school, we had kind of made a name for ourselves, but we were both having a pretty good year. I'd beat some, ranked seniors, other ranked upperclassmen, and we'd wrestled out of state a lot. So we had got a lot of competition in West Virginia. So I'd faced a lot of tough competition. So rolling into the district tournament that year, I actually had a very tough draw. Wayne County was in our district, as we mentioned earlier, and they had a tough upperclassman named Doug Upchurch.
Oh, yeah, Doug. Yep.
So Doug Upchurch was a junior my freshman year, and Doug, I don't think he had placed at the state tournament yet, but he was consistently ranked as one of the top 103 pounders in the state every year he wrestled. As most people know, Wayne County had a very well-known style they like to throw. So we were always taught you don't lock up with a Wayne County wrestler. You don't want to shoot a head on the outside single or a high crotch. If you do, finish quick, because if you leave your head hanging, they're going to chin whip you to your back. So I was coached by our coach, Jerry Butcher, to finish shots quickly, don't type. And I was also informed by Jim Matney numerous times to not get in these situations with a Wayne County wrestler. So this was probably going to be my toughest test of the year as far as in-state goes. Well, I'm wrestling Doug Upchurch, and sure enough, I shoot a high crotch and get whipped straight to my back in the opening seconds of the match. So Doug has me on my back for the entire first period. It's 5-0 going into the second. I was literally saved by the bell. So second period starts, and I can't remember who starts top or bottom, but essentially I close the gap. It's 5-4, or I maybe scored a takedown. I can't remember, but I end up, if I remember correctly, putting him on his back, and he ends up tapping out on his back. So it results in 3 back points and the additional point since he came off his back. So I was up 6-5 in the third period, and I end up winning because of that technical point.
No way.
So going in districts, I just beat a highly ranked junior. So I got the treat of wrestling Billy Clark in the finals.
Yep.
So Billy Clark was one of Sheldon Clark's best wrestlers for several years. He was always a lightweight, 103 to 112. He was highly technical. He was never in a rush, though. He was very slow and methodical in wrestling, but technique-wise, he was going to be hard to beat. So I come off this emotional win over high-ranked upperclassman in Doug Upchurch, only to be pinned in probably less than a minute by Billy Clark.
Billy was tough. Billy was good.
Billy was, somebody that I'd grown up, or in my wrestling career, grew up wrestling with him and wrestled him a couple times in my freshman year. And I don't think I ever made it out of the first period with him. So it was no surprise going into districts. So following districts, we're in the regional tournament. And I can't remember the location.
No, our freshman year was at Wayne County.
Okay.
2000 was at Wayne County.
Districts were at Sheldon Clark. Regionals were at Wayne. So our region was loaded that year with 103s. And I'll kind of jump the gun here, but in my weight class, we had 4 state place winners in that bracket in regions. And this was back in the 16-man bracket days of the state tournament. So the top 4 in our region were top 6 in the state that year.
I believe that.
So I end up wrestling a soon-to-be well-known wrestler, Luke Metzger, in the semifinals.
Henry Clay.
Yep. So Luke Metzger was a very talented 103-pounder that year who went on to win a couple of state championships, if I remember correctly, and had a very well-known match against Scott Cooper, I believe.
2003.
Yeah. So Luke beats me. He decisions me. It was a very tight match, but ultimately he comes out on top. And I end up getting knocked into the loser's bracket, and I wrestle Doug Upchurch again for 3rd and 4th, and this time he beats me. It wasn't close. He whipped me pretty good. Billy Clark goes on to win the regional tournament that year over Luke Metzger. So I've gone 2 consecutive weeks, districts and regionals, with wrestling Doug Upchurch, and make it to the state tournament as a 4th seed. I think in the first round I wrestled Nathan Thomas from Union County. I could be wrong. I know I did wrestle him sometime during the tournament, but he knocks me into the loser's bracket right off the bat. It was a competitive match. It was a decision, but he clearly controlled the match. So I get knocked in the loser's bracket. I can't remember the particulars of who I wrestled in, but guess who I end up wrestling again in the loser's bracket? Doug Upchurch.
Doug Upchurch.
So for the 3rd consecutive week, I wrestled Doug Upchurch, and again, he beats me pretty good. So I just got him. I got that one win over Doug Upchurch, and since then he beat me every time. But I ended up with 6th place that year as a freshman.
6th place, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So I go from middle school, didn't really have a good 7th or 8th grade year, and then ended up placing my freshman year in a very tough weight class. So, freshman year I consider a success.
Absolutely. And 2001, you, of course, continued to wrestle. Your 2001 season, how did it go?
So in 2001, I bumped up to 112, and I had, high expectations after placing my freshman year. So I'd had a pretty good season up until probably late December when we decided to enter the Woodford County Invitational. Now, we had never wrestled in the Woodford County Invitational. At the time, the Woodford County Invitational was one of the bigger tournaments in the state. It was mostly local or Central Kentucky and Northern Kentucky schools, some Louisville schools, but also a few Indiana schools. I think Floyd Central Indiana was there. So at that tournament, I had a high seed. I might have been first seed given the fact I'd been a previous state place winner. And I think early in the tournament, I matched up against a former state place winner from Ballard named Stephen Ludwig. And I think he placed at 112 the year before. So in the tournament, I beat him, and I was then paired up against a no-name Woodford County wrestler. Never heard of him, wasn't varsity the year before. I quickly learned who he was, though. Tyler Baldwin.
Yep.
So I go in thinking I'm going to beat this scrub from Woodford County to death. And he beats me 12-1. I walked off the mat not knowing what hit me. I'm like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Where was he last year? And I get knocked into the loser's bracket. I think I ended up taking 4th at that tournament. I got beat by the kid from Floyd Central Indiana for the 3rd and 4th place match. But it was kind of like a gut check time. I just got beat by what at the time I thought was a no-name Woodford County wrestler, and then got beat by an out-of-state kid in a close match, but it was a reality check.
Yep.
So, wrestled through the rest of the year, a lot of out-of-state competition, had some good wins, some tough losses, but I roll into district tournament. At the time, I think I was a number 2 seed going into districts. Again, there's a Wayne County wrestler in my bracket that is higher seed than me, and his name was Nathan Turpin.
Yep, I wrestled Nathan. Yep, he's really good.
So the interesting thing about Nathan Turpin was the year before in the district tournament at 112 at Sheldon Clark, he wrestles my twin brother Heath in the finals, and my brother beats him in a very dramatic overtime match.
I remember that. I was there. Yep.
And when I say dramatic, it was incredibly dramatic. Takedowns at the end of regulation, close takedowns that could have decided the match. There was a lot of things that could have gone either way, but regardless, my brother had beat him the previous year in district. So I have a pretty easy road to the district finals. He does too. I think he pinned his way through. I might have pinned my way through as well. So we're matched up with one another. And in similar fashion to my brother, I think I might have beat him in overtime as well, in a very low-scoring affair. But so that sets me up for the regional tournament, which we have Woodford in our region at that time. And Tyler Baldwin is on the other side of the bracket as the district champ. I am the district champ on our side. He beats Turpin, I think maybe in overtime in his semifinals. And I can't remember who I beat, but I think I had a much easier road than Tyler Baldwin. So Baldwin and I are matched up again in the regional tournament for our second time since the WCI. And it's a much closer match this time, and we go into overtime, and he beats me on a takedown in the first overtime period. So for this, second time in the year, this no-name wrestler from Woodford County beat me. So I guess at this point, he's really not a no-name wrestler.
So he's not a no-name anymore, man. He's on a path.
So this sets up for state tournament. And at this time, I don't know exactly what I was ranked. We didn't have a ranking system like what Ranger does for on the Kentucky Wrestling website. The only rankings that I knew of were out of LaRue County, and Coach Gary Payton, who used to be a longtime assistant with LaRue County, had a LaRue County Hawks wrestling website. and he would do rankings, and they were typically based on coach submissions. In fact, I remember corresponding with him when I was maybe a freshman or sophomore, asking when he would send out updated rankings, and he replied, "If your Uncle Jim would send me some information, maybe we could rank you Eastern Kentucky wrestlers." It was a common misconception that Jim Matney was my uncle, but we were in fact more distantly related, and I think if you want to get technical, we were second cousins once removed.
Okay, second cousin once removed.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
if you want to get technical. But anyway, so rolling into the state tournament at 112 pounds that year in 2001. First round, I think I had a kid from PRP, Derek Whitaker, and I believe I beat him by a tech fall. So next round, I'm up against Brad Strauss from Ryle. Now, Brad Strauss had a very good season, and he won his region, I believe, by upset over a kid from Fern Creek, Josh Matthews. Josh Matthews was number one in the state for most of the year. And I believe that, since we mentioned the WCI, I think Tyler Baldwin was actually beat by Josh Matthews at the WCI that year. Now, I could be wrong, but I think I remember that's how it happened. So we have Josh Matthews with big wins over Baldwin, who beat me. So I was going in thinking I probably am going to place, maybe a finalist. But Brad Strauss had just beat Josh Matthews. So Brad Strauss looked to be the favorite in that year's tournament. I knew very little about Ryle. I knew they're from Northern Kentucky. Their coach, Dave Barnes, was a former collegiate wrestler who was very tough. So they were well coached. They wrestled a tough schedule. And Brad Strauss had just beat the number one kid in the state. So I knew I was in for a tough match.
Yeah.
So in a little bit of scouting and talking to other coaches, there was one thing I knew about Brad Strauss. He loved the switch from the bottom position. So just like wrestling in Wayne County wrestling, avoiding types and stuff, I was on, if I was on top, I needed to avoid getting in positions, giving up the switch.
Yep.
So I think the first period was 0-0, and second period he chooses down, and guess what? He gets a switch.
It's a switch on you, huh?
Yeah. So he, I think, rides me out for the period. Third period, I'm down. I eventually get an escape, and with probably 20 seconds left, I get a takedown, and the whole time I'm trying to avoid the switch. I end up getting a deep spiral out to the side and ride him out for the last 20 seconds or so.
Couldn't hit the switch, could he?
He could not hit the switch, but he did earlier in the match. But we stuffed it after that. So going in to the next match, I wrestled a guy from St. X, I believe. Yeah, Brandon Worth. Brandon Worth, I think the next year was a state finalist against Tyler Baldwin. So I ended up beating Brandon Worth by decision to set up a match against Tyler Baldwin. So just to give a little rundown of Tyler Baldwin's run to the state finals, I think he had 2 consecutive overtime matches prior to the state finals. So his quarterfinals and semifinals were both overtime victories over, now I could be wrong, but I'm thinking Nathan Thomas from Union and Josh Matthews from Fern Creek. So he avenged an earlier season loss to Matthews, but 2 consecutive overtime matches. Now, I may be wrong about the Nathan Thomas match, but I believe it was Nathan Thomas and Josh Matthews. So there we are for the second consecutive weekend. And just like our regional finals matchup, we go into overtime. I shoot right off the bat. I get in deep. He essentially does a sit-around crotch lock and steps over my leg, and they call 2 for the takedown. So, I remember going into that match, I was honestly happy to be there. And realistically, I didn't anticipate that I would be a state finalist that year. Although I had a good freshman year, I was, happy that I made it to the finals. Of course, I would have preferred to win, but I was very close, and I did lose to a very talented wrestler in Tyler Baldwin.
2-time state champion,
Yeah.
back-to-back. So sophomore year, you make it under the lights. We actually have that video, but of course we're not doing a review on that. We're going to be getting with Tyler soon, so you'll be seeing Nick's match versus Tyler in a couple videos, or a couple, videos past this one. But that's incredible to make it, with 2 years really varsity experience to the state finals, especially like I said back then when you districts, regions, you had a murderer's row going through regions. So that's pretty good career so far. That's better than most people, really. So what about your junior? How's that go?
So junior season, now expectations were really high. I mean, I'd made it to state finals. I was, gunning for a state championship after that. We continued to wrestle tough competition, primarily out of state. I mean, it was Tennessee, it was Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio. We pretty much wrestled in state, maybe the first and last weekends of the regular season.
Yep.
I'd beat some really good kids that year and had some tough losses, but overall it was a successful year. But in keeping up with other wrestling teams, it was a little more difficult. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because, now with the internet, everybody's record, who they wrestled. You can watch videos of them on Flow.
Yep.
Message board activity is pretty heavy. Back then, we just had Bluegrass Preps.
Yep.
And we had the Courier Journal and the Herald Leader posting wrestling results occasionally. Sometimes you just get the team scores at tournaments. You might get the individual champion. But I mentioned this because I caught wind that Tyler Baldwin had one loss that year. And it was to a wrestler from Virginia High School, which is in Bristol, Virginia. Now, for those of you that don't know, Bristol is a town that is on the border of Virginia and Tennessee.
Yeah.
So it's literally cut down the middle by a state line.
Yep. And there's that famous. You guys are seeing it where like the road splits and it's got
Right.
like one side Tennessee, one side Virginia. So that's pretty cool. It's like that.
So in Bristol, on the Virginia side, you have Virginia High, and on the Tennessee side, you have Tennessee High. So early in the year, we wrestled in Tennessee at Elizabethton High School. It was an early season dual meet, and we wrestled Virginia. So I get matched up with at 119 pounds with a guy, last name Nice. I do not remember his first name, but Nice was a very funky wrestler. I remember some of his teammates essentially saying they felt sorry for whoever wrestled Nice. Well, I wrestled Nice, and it really wasn't that competitive of a match. I made your decision him. I was never in trouble.
Oh, my.
I learned later in the season that is Tyler Baldwin's only loss. So now my confidence was at an all-time high. I still realize that Tyler Baldwin is the defending state champ. He's incredibly talented, great coaches from a great team. I was never taking him lightly, but it was confidence inspiring to know that his one loss was to somebody that I had beat. I'm not going to say easily, but,
A major decision. I mean, that's pretty good.
So we decided to contact Virginia High, and we set up a practice date with them. My coach had talked with their coach, and they didn't have a tape of the match, but they welcomed us to come and practice in Bristol. So luckily, our wrestling coach, Jerry Butcher, was the assistant principal of the high school. So he could pretty much do whatever he wanted to.
Helps out.
We loaded up the bus at noon and drove to Bristol. And we ended up practicing, and I wrestled with Nice. Well, I ended up breaking my tailbone in that practice.
Oh, my.
I was wrestling with Nice, and it was a smaller wrestling room. I got tripped up over another group wrestling, and I ended up landing on top of another wrestler, and my tailbone hit some bone of their body, and I cracked my tailbone. I couldn't even walk.
Oh, my.
And this was the week before regionals. Now, at this point, we had transitioned to the 32-man bracket, so it was regionals and state. So I couldn't even walk. So go down to Bristol, practice, as I mentioned, ended up breaking my tailbone in the practice. So this is a week before regional tournament. I did cut some weight, and not being able to run or even walk or sit down due to breaking my tailbone, I couldn't practice, I couldn't cut weight, and I sat out the regional tournament. Now, by the time state tournament rolled around, I was getting around a lot better, and instant regret set in about not wrestling in regionals. I'd wrestled everybody in my region multiple times. I had essentially no competition in my region. I could have probably made it to the placement matches and forfeited, or I could have made it to finals and probably hopped around and potentially won the match. So, regardless, hindsight's 20/20. Can't go back, know, to that regional tournament and wrestle. But
it's a good story, though. I mean, it really is.
well, and it ends up that the way the draw worked out that year, I would have wrestled Tyler Baldwin in the semifinals. If I remember correctly. We were definitely on the same side. I would have matched up either quarters or semis with him. Now, that's not to say that my draw was easy. I remember looking at that bracket at the time, and I would have faced some pretty tough wrestlers prior to meeting up with Tyler Baldwin. So, you know, nothing's given.
Right.
But it looked like Tyler Baldwin and I were on a collision course again for another match. And, you know, at this time, I hoped that when we matched up, maybe I would have the upper hand. You know, I'd hit several camps. I think I did 2 camps that summer. I even did a camp pre-season. I did a Concerto camp.
Oh, yeah?
Maybe the weekend of Thanksgiving. And so, I mean, I'd prepared a lot. We wrestled a tough schedule. And like I said, his only loss that year was to a guy that I beat. So I feel like everything was, you know, in place that I could have had a better match against him and possibly beat him. But, you know, he beat me 3 times in my career. I never beat him. So if I was a betting man, I'd probably say he was going to win the 4th match. But who knows? A lot can change in one season.
Now, let me ask you this question. You're a physician, like I said, Dr. Nick Chaffin. And a tree just fell. I'm not sure if you guys heard that, but we had a storm. We're outside. We're actually at Nick and Heath's house here, and there's no power. That's why we're sitting outside. So you've heard this big tree crack. You know what's going on. But you're a physician. What would 2022 Dr. Nick Chaffin advise 2002 Nick Chaffin, the wrestler, about competing with a broken tailbone?
Well, I guess it depends on how well I knew the patient, Nick Chaffin. If he was a close personal family friend, I'd probably tell him, do whatever you can to wrestle.
Okay.
But I guess the real medical answer would have been, you probably need to sit this one out.
So now, in your professional medical opinion, you think you made the right decision about your body not wrestling that year?
For health, yes,
Okay.
but for pride and everything
Absolutely.
else is probably the wrong
I got
decision.
you. I got you. So you're going into your senior year. You're a 2-time state placer. Probably would have been a 3-time state placer. Maybe made it to the finals again. 2002, but you just said didn't happen. 2003 senior year. You're on a mission. Kind of walk us through your senior year. You know, there's only one way this can end, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, expectations were as high as they could possibly be. I mean, anything less than a state championship at this point would be considered a failure. You know, coming off of what I'd consider a surprise state place winning, you know, performance my freshman year, I mean, I never expected to be a state place winner. And sophomore year, state finals was kind of a surprise. But,
Right.
you know, junior year, things changed. I had great, you know, good season, good off season. And rolling into senior year, I prepared a lot as well. Same thing, doing the, you know, multiple camps in the summer, camps, you know, in the preseason. Right. And actually got a surprise that year. My twin brother, who had taken a 2-year hiatus from wrestling to play basketball, I mean, he was 5'5". Couldn't really shoot really good, but he could handle the ball, played some good defense, but decided he wanted to give it a shot on the hardwood for 2 years. I received an email. This was back, you know, we didn't text each other. I got an email from him that asked, what size wrestling shoes should I get for wrestling camp? And that was the first that I knew he was going to wrestle his senior year. So we were actually at the Governor's Scholars Program, and he decides he's going to wrestle, and his first outing is going to be at the Bluegrass State Games. So been off for 2 years, decides to wrestle in Bluegrass State Games, buys the wrestling shoes. He actually cut weight during the Governor's Scholars Program, running, working out, you know, starving himself a little bit. And he wrestled the Bluegrass State Games. He wins the Bluegrass State Games that year. And he decides he's going to, you know, wrestle the high school season. So I go into my senior year with these expectations that I'm going to win it. Now I have a great practice partner back.
Yeah, that's a big help to have.
This has been an ongoing debate, and I've never really, it's not bothered me to ever admit this, but my brother did beat me a lot more than I beat him in the wrestling room. And we had some common opponents in high school that he beat that I didn't, but also there's a few people I beat that he didn't. But regardless, the wrestling room changed significantly that year. So I go from sophomore and junior year. not having anybody in the room that was a previous state place winner. My freshman year, that was the only state place winner we'd ever had, was my freshman year and sophomore year. Prior to me, when I was in 8th grade, we had our first state qualifier, which was a huge thing for Prestonsburg because it was the second year in existence. But our 145-pound wrestler, Hank Mullins, was our first state place winner. Or excuse me, first state qualifier.
Okay.
And then I was followed up the next year as the first state placer. So my brother and I were good practice partners because, one, we had the sibling rivalry going on. And if anybody has wrestled with their brothers, you don't want them to get the upper hand. It not only does it, you just don't want to get beat, but you don't want to get beat by your brother because you'll never hear the end of it. And also, we would get really mad at each other, and a lot of times it would get a lot more physical than just a wrestling match. But regardless, going into my senior year, I now have a good practice partner back, and that made a big difference. I wonder if in my sophomore and junior years, if I would have had him in the room, if things would have been different, and I think they probably would have. But going into senior year, we again wrestled a very tough out-of-state competition. Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio. Like previous years, I had some really good wins. Wrestled some really tough tournaments with some tough guys. Wrestled guys that went on to be senior national champions.
Oh my!
Collegiate wrestlers. And when we did wrestle in state, we also faced some tough competition. But that year was also a 32-man bracket state tournament, regions then state. So regional tournament rolls around. I think I might have had 50-plus wins and to 4 losses, and those 4 losses were to really tough wrestlers. So I was prepared. So regions roll around, and the region in my weight class of that year was not particularly tough. I think I pinned or teched everybody, and I think that year I got most outstanding wrestler, quickest pin, I think most pins in least amount of time. I think I got every bit of hardware in the regional tournament you could get. So that set up for state tournament as a number 1 seed going in.
Now, we have your bracket. If you would go ahead and pull it up for us. We're without Wi-Fi. We're without cell signal up here, so we're going to have Nick go over the bracket. Who's your first round opponent?
Okay, so my first round opponent that year was from Central Hardin, and it was Marcus Bradbury. He is the older brother of Myron Bradbury, former Trinity wrestler and state champion, I believe.
I think Myron beats Mark Hall in the 2010 state finals that we have the video with Jim Shaw review on. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's one of the more exciting matches of the state tournament history. So I beat him by technical fall. Now I don't know if I wrestled him earlier in the year or not, but we were definitely at some meets with Central Hardin. Right. So next match in the round of 16 was Nick Griggs from Tates Creek, and Nick Griggs was the son of Coach Griggs at Tates Creek, longtime head coach. That also ended by technical fall. So next round, quarterfinals, competition stiffens a little bit, and I wrestle Corey Bancamper from Campbell County. Corey's a tough wrestler, wrestled a long time, and also coach's son.
Yeah, a lot of respect for the Campbell County program, Coach Bancamper, the whole shebang, so a lot of respect there.
And I believe Bancamper might have been one of the higher ranked, possibly number 1 in the state that year, going into that tournament. Right. Now, I obviously don't have those rankings in front of me, but I knew going into that match that it was going to be a really tough match against a well-coached, well-disciplined wrestler with a lot of experience who wrestled a Northern Kentucky competition, a lot of Ohio, competition. So, ended up winning that match 7-2. I don't remember much of the details, but I remember maybe a couple takedowns, escapes. And ended up with a decision 7-2. So that takes me into the semifinals against a wrestler from Seneca, Carlos Rodriguez. And I knew the name Carlos Rodriguez because I believe he was ranked pretty high in the state much of the year. Now, Seneca at the time had a very respected program.
They were good. Seneca had a pretty good program then.
Yeah, they were known for their lightweight wrestlers. Their coach had been with them for a long time. they were always very good on their feet, and it seems like every one of their lightweights, 103 to 130, they were always tough. So I knew going in that this was going to be a dogfight, but ended up coming away in that match with a decision 5-3, and I actually have watched that match a couple times since then, and there were a lot of moments where it could have gone either way. So I'm thankful that I came out on top during that match.
Yeah.
So,
gotta do what you gotta do, man. You gotta, whatever you gotta do to get that win.
so that sets up for the finals.
And before we get to the finals, you're wrestling. Go ahead and tell who you're wrestling, because I got something to say. Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So my opponent in the finals was Chris Perry from Christian County. And prior to this match, I was familiar with the name Chris Perry from rankings. And I believe he was a state place winner the previous year. I think he got 7th his sophomore year.
I don't have it in front of me. I don't.
So I really, other than that, I did not know much about Chris Perry. And I knew a little bit about Christian County. They have a strong wrestling history.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
produced some good wrestlers. And from what I can remember, the Christian County wrestlers always thought they were just strong, athletic, and you were going to have to wrestle a hard 6 minutes if you made it that long.
Absolutely. If you haven't watched Chris Perry's review video, Chris goes on in 2004 to win the state championship. We done a video with him during the marathon session. First time I ever met Chris, great guy. Chris, a lot of respect for you, Hopkinsville Fire Department. He gives the specifics, but off the top of my head, he said that he competed in like a state weightlifting competition for his age, and he won like the deadlift, bench press, cleaning all the competitions. Like he was like the top in his weight, and he was like benching like 350, all these crazy amounts. And as you guys are going to see, you talk about some big 119s. I'm not saying there's a reason why there's multiple day weigh-ins now, but there was a reason why there's a multiple day weigh-ins. We're not going to throw any names out, are we, Nick? We're not going to say anything about that. But you guys were massive, as you're going to see on the video. But I think you had some things you wanted to say about Chris, about his wrestling.
So, going into the state tournament, I was aware of a lot of the names in the bracket, but I didn't know any particulars. I knew, Carlos Rodriguez was from a tough program. I knew Corey Bankamper, coach's son, tough wrestler. Some of them I'd seen wrestle before, maybe wrestled in previous years. But Chris Perry was from Christian County, very western Kentucky, versus me being in eastern Kentucky. I'm not sure of the exact distance, but we're probably 6 to 7 hours apart.
Every bit of it.
So it was rare back then that you would have teams from that far west wrestle teams this far east. And this was pre-flow wrestling, pre-track wrestling. You didn't see these guys wrestle, so I didn't know much about him at all other than getting on the KHSAA website and seeing previous results, or getting on Bluegrass Preps, which was a fairly active wrestling message board back then, not so much anymore. But I go into the state finals knowing I'm wrestling Chris Perry from Christian County and not knowing much about his style. Given the fact that he was a previous state place winner and he made it to the finals that year, I figure that he's going to be pretty tough, but like I said, didn't know much about him. The only tip I got about him was from the guy that he beat in the semifinals, Justin Johnson from Danville, who ended up getting 3rd or 4th that year. He told me that Chris Perry was very fast, very athletic, very strong, and liked the big moves. So I'm assuming throws, getting in scramble situations, putting you on your back. And that's all I knew, and that's what I was thinking, that I was going in and I needed to be careful that I was wrestling a guy who's athletic. But ultimately, I thought I was going to go in, and I thought I was going to have a much easier time than I did.
And as we have the video you guys are seeing, we're at the Farnham Dungeon Center under the lights. So you're your second time under the lights. Some people get under the lights, and the best move they have is a handshake. You wrestled Tyler, respectable, but not the outcome. This year, your last shot. Your last, as Eminem would say, your one opportunity, for glory, whatever it is. And you're here. have you mentally, I guess, rehearsed already winning, or was you just gonna take it as it come, or where was your head space at when it come to your name being called just in a second coming out? What were you thinking?
So, I guess Mike Tyson said that everybody has a game plan until they get punched in the mouth. I thought I was going to go out there and wrestle the best match I've ever wrestled. Just, put it to him and take him out of his game,
Right.
and hopefully cruise to a victory. And that's what I was playing in my head.
Well, that's good enough. Now, this 2003 video has the introductions, it has the match, and it has the medal ceremony. So we're gonna hit play here and let's do it.
All right, so I was definitely, although I had this game plan that I was going to go out there and just take it to him, I was still definitely nervous.
Right.
And if you notice, I run out here and the face-off is very brief. It's just a handshake and go. And that was from my experience wrestling Tyler Baldwin, because that's how he did the handshake to me.
Okay.
So I was like, that's kind of cool. So that's how I did it.
Now,
so
you can see you guys are massive right here.
So I'd like to say something about the white singlets here. We only wore those in championship matches.
Right.
We used to wrestle down in Bradley Central, Tennessee, in Cleveland, and that's near University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. Bradley Central was the team to beat back then.
Right.
And they had a similar black singlet with a gold paw, and that's it.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the video, we'll talk more about this white singlet. But right off the bat, what are you thinking? You're in the finals. You lock up with him. You both are studs. Did you feel you were stronger? He was stronger?
So, like I said, entering this match, I thought I was going to just take it to him. Well, and take him out of his game. Well, complete opposite happened. He was more aggressive than I anticipated that he would be.
Right.
Taking shots, getting in pretty good. I will say that our styles were completely different, though. He was, from at least this one match with him, he's aggressive, takes a lot of shots. I always felt that I was more methodical, like to fill somebody out, set things up. There was no filling out in this match.
Yeah, no, you guys are, you're going straight at it.
I would have preferred to fill things out, and maybe if I went into the second period scoreless, I would be completely fine with that. But he wasn't allowing that game plan. But this is the fourth shot to my 0 shots, and eventually I get to spin behind. Now,
right there, you're trying to get the arm. Right. Any shot you're getting at, or is he too strong for it? Or
so yeah, he was a very strong wrestler, and I was trying to maybe do head in the elbow or head in the armpit and break him down to bar the arm, but that wasn't happening. And occasionally I transitioned to the spiral.
Right.
Now, I did not want to get back to our feet because he was taking a lot of shots, and he was getting in fairly deep on a lot of them. So I wanted to minimize the chance he was going to get a takedown. So I always felt pretty confident on top. I felt like I could ride most people.
Right.
Now, even though I could ride well, I never felt like I was great at turning, but as far as putting a deep spiral, breaking somebody down, chop and catch armbar, I always felt I could control somebody from top. So, second period, Chris defers, and I'm going down.
So, you've got, who's in your corner this match?
Okay, so somebody I failed to mention as a coach was former Sheldon Clark wrestler, state champ, outstanding wrestler, Josh Stepp. So Josh Stepp came on board with our program my junior year, I believe, maybe sophomore year, but he wasn't in my corner in the sophomore year. But eventually he plays a bigger role in our wrestling room, which was a good thing. He was very talented. But anyway, so
he goes to lift you right there. What are you thinking?
Okay, so typically my go-to is a stand-up.
Right.
I felt that people could not hold me down, and I always felt like because I was strong enough and athletic enough, I could get away. Well, multiple attempts here to stand up. Chris ends up throwing in a leg, gets the potential dangerous call, and here he's working for the guillotine, which I don't really see work very often on high-level wrestlers. I'm not saying I was high-level, but you'd probably have to be significantly stronger than me to pull this one off. And Chris was incredibly strong, but I don't think the strength difference was enough to be able to put that in.
Right.
So he's got a, leg in here, trying to base back up. And I pull a sit out.
Now, good job. So we're at 4-0.
Now, that sit out, well, we'll get to this because I think we have some action here. I think he's going to hit a Granby.
Yep.
Okay. So almost go to my back here. Okay. So talk about Chris being an explosive wrestler. And that just shows the explosiveness.
Yep.
And he's going for banana splits here, which doesn't work. And like I said, I've never had anybody put me in the splits. Maybe in practice, but in a real match. No,
right.
I think I ended up hitting that same sit out, like a leg in sit out. And there's a more technical name for it.
Yeah.
But as soon as he throws it in.
There it is. There it is.
Now,
Boom.
that move, I'd never hit in a match, ever. And my brother and I used to hit it on each other all the time in practice, though. But honestly, most people didn't ride legs back in Eastern Kentucky.
Yep.
So there he goes with Granby or Peterson. But so a lot of action here. I think it's 6-2 at this point.
That's what I think I've got it at 6-2. He's taken down. You're up 4 going in with 2 minutes to go. What are we thinking?
I want to ride him out here and hopefully not give up anything stupid. So
can you hear the fans? Can you hear like your mom and dad, your brother, coaches? Are you zoned out or?
Yeah, I mean with the headgear on and everything. All right, so almost hits the Peterson here. Okay, so he ends up getting the reversal. Could have been a lot worse for me.
Yeah.
Okay, but no, I can't really hear much.
He's trying for that cradle.
So at this point, I'm thinking I've got a 2-point lead in the third period, and probably going to really try to just ride the timeout and come away with a victory. Now, there's a few things that happen here that I still are a mystery to me. There ends up being a stalling call or two, and to this day, I don't know if they were incorrectly scored or not. But Chris is here working the arm bar, or chicken wing rather,
right,
and trying to lock it up.
You're smart enough to get out of bounds.
Yeah, so out of bounds rules are a little different then.
Yep.
You could play the out of bounds line more strategically than you can now, and you could get saved by the out of bounds line.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure how much time's left here, but so probably should have gone for a stalemate there, but probably would have put us back in the same position eventually. But he's here trying to work for just going for the splits, maybe the guillotine, and I'm just trying to ride the timeout.
Yeah, I don't see him splitting too many people in that weight class, or even the weight class or two above you splitting the legs like that. I just don't see it. All right,
so they call a stalling here, and I don't see if they indicate who the call was on, but it looks like, based on his reaction, it was called on him. And I think this might have given me an additional point. The thing is, I don't remember when the first stalling call was, and we're getting real short time here.
He's getting kind of.
I think I remember glancing up at the clock there and realizing we're very short time. And I think I do look at I can see the clock, and I know that there's not enough time for him to get enough bats to beat me.
Boom!
So I was a little excited there.
Hey, no, you earned it.
So
it's 7-4. There's Coach Butcher and Josh Stepp.
Yes. So this is something that we had always talked about, and this is definitely a Coach Matney style.
Yep.
But it was the first opportunity that we were able to do that in Prestonsburg wrestling history. And I think talking about pre-match, envisioning things, I always did envision getting carried up into the stands and it all worked out the way it's supposed to.
And you guys are seeing Nick has a banner up in Prestonsburg's gym, 2,319 pounds. Also, there's like a shadow box there at Prestonsburg's gym of this singlet. And like I guess they give you like a state championship trophy.
Yeah.
And like I guess there's like a plaque or something right there below it of all that, which is pretty cool that they honor you that way. Now, on this podium throughout the season, how many of these guys did you wrestle? Do you remember?
So I would have to look at the bracket again, but so that I believe that's Carlos Rodriguez there. So I wrestled in the state tournament.
Right.
The 7th place was Justin Kaleva from Eastern. Now, if I remember correctly, Kaleva might actually have been the number 1 in the state, not Bandcamper, but there's Bandcamper.
Yeah.
So maybe thinking back,
And that's his dad giving him the.
Kaleva from Eastern may have been number 1 in the state, and I think he was number 1 in the state because he had beat Chris Perry earlier in the year. That might have been Perry, one of his only losses, maybe his only loss. And I think that was Chris Skaggs from South Oldham.
This is in South Oldham that year. They won the team title. They
Right.
crushed the team score and everything.
And this is Justin Johnson from Danville, 3rd place. So Chris Perry may have had one loss that year, and I think it was to Kaleva. And from talking to Chris later, from how he tells it, I think he was attempting a cradle and a suicide cradle and slipped, and Kaleva pinned him.
Okay.
Now, that's a story that I was told
There
20
you are.
years ago.
On top of the world, got your bracket, got your medal.
Yeah.
First state champion in Prestonsburg history. And I think that was the first team or individual Prestonsburg state champion of any KHSAA activity, correct?
So it was definitely the first state championship in the modern era. So Prestonsburg did have a state championship baseball team in 1948.
1940, okay.
So since 48, that I was the first state
Okay.
champion in any sport.
Okay, well, I didn't know that about the baseball team. That is kind of cool. So you watched it. This is the KHSAA version. You have a camcorder version that your parents kept all these years, but when we got the footage, sent you a copy, of course. And is the perspective on this one? We've only had this a short time, different than like you remember it from watching your home video.
Yeah, the home video was shot from a different angle, of course. So it was nice to see this angle. I remember things a little bit differently than how they actually occurred, at least viewing it from this angle. I guess the older you get, the better you are. And I've watched our tape, multiple times. So watching this one when we were able to obtain it definitely put a different perspective on things. It made me realize how much closer the match was. I mean, the score ended up being 7-4.
Right.
So, it's very close. But, Chris, almost put me on my back several times.
That Peterson roll is
Right.
Whew.
And in the early part of the first period, had several near takedowns. So, like I said, I went into the match thinking I was going to take him off his game, and it was the complete opposite.
Right.
Chris Perry controlled the tempo and, at times was doing what he wanted to. I think the difference was that, I was strong, pretty athletic. I think my methodical approach did, stuff a lot of, I had a really good skill set for, a 119-pounder. He was explosive, quick, had the big moves, always looking for a pin, always looking to turn, and had relentless takedowns.
I can see him in just a split second changing, throwing like that Peterson roll. A lesser wrestler, that guy's he's stuck. It's over. As strong as he was, quick as what he was right there, I could see that just being a match ender just like that.
And just reviewing the bracket, because I looked at this a couple weeks ago, he had he wrestled, I was looking at his state championship bracket
04.
from 04, and he had some very big wins against really tough competition and dominating wins, pins, majors, things like that. I think he beat Derek Scott And Derek Scott was a multiple-time state champ. Had some other big wins that year. So, Chris Perry was a dominating wrestler, especially his senior year. But even junior year, one loss, and just some of the matches he had.
If you haven't, like I said earlier, go back and after we get done with this one, go watch Chris's 2004 video. Chris is a great interview, a great match to watch as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, in reviewing his matches, pin in a minute 15, tech fall, decision over a tough Justin Johnson, 9-2 in the semis. He had a great tournament run that year, and like I said, if we wrestled again, who knows how it would have gone, but I came out on top of that match, and I'm very thankful for it. Chris ended up getting a state championship the next year, so I'm very happy for him. And I've talked to Chris several times since that state tournament, and I would like to just dispel the rumors. I never weighed 250 pounds. I was significantly bigger following wrestling season and in college, but maybe the most I ever weighed was 200 or 205. When you're not even 5'6" and you're stocky, you look a lot heavier than you really are. But yeah, I did get a little bigger, but I was never 250 pounds like Chris claims. But like I said, when you're short and stocky, you look a little bigger than what you really are.
Like I said, we're not going to bring up why the state went to having multiple day weigh-ins. We just, some things are best left unsaid.
Okay.
Well, that's all we want to say about that. But, man, excellent interview, excellent insight on Prestonsburg wrestling, your career as a whole. I've said in multiple videos, and I said earlier, your position, it's hard to say, hey, Nick, you can't go to work and save somebody's life, so we was able to get some free time today. Thank you for doing it with me. If you haven't watched Heath's video, we do a 1969 video review from the 112-pound weight class. You need to go check it out. It's really good. Heath does a good interview as well. But, Nick, any closing thoughts to wrap this one up, put a bow on it?
No, I'm just glad we're finally able to get this done, and there's a lot of other good stories out there about Kentucky
Absolutely.
wrestling, and I'd just like to thank you for doing this for everybody.
And I want to say that wrestling brought me, Nick, and Heath together, and wrestling's kept us together. When we got the idea, well, at Coach Matney's funeral, in case you don't know, Coach Matney's visitation, went up to Josh Muntz and said, hey, I got this idea. His video was a camcorder. His state championship match was a camcorder on YouTube. Pulled it off, said, hey, I'd like to do this review with you. Started making some phone calls, finding, the world's smaller now, information so much readily available. Got with the KHSAA, got with some people, found out where the video archive was, what was available. And I remember if I messaged you or Heath first, I don't remember, but then I think Heath called me. It's like, hey, what they got. We went in together, purchased what they had, and of course all three of us have, the videos. And it's so great that we know that they're in an arena that's going to be used. They're not sitting on a shelf. They're not in an archive wasting away. They're where people can be enjoyed. So like we went in together, made the purchase, and I'll message these guys and say, hey, what do you think? Ideas, how can we improve? What can we do this? Who would you want to see next? And Heath and Nick both great insight, so we kind of feed off each other. So thank you for helping out with you and your brother both helping out with the insight, getting people, scheduling people, whoever it may be. But yeah, like I said, man, wrestling brought us together. Wrestling's kept us together, and I'm just glad that we're able to finally tell your story, let Prestonsburg wrestling be celebrated, and let 250-pound Nick Chaffin on Saturday evening, win his state championship, 119-pound state championship. So no, he knows I miss him. That's all we got from Prestonsburg. Be looking out for a whole bunch of Woodford County videos. We're going down there in a couple, well, by the time you see this, the video will be posted. But we're going to be going down there in a few days as of this taping, meeting with a bunch of Woodford County guys from the 90s, early 2000s, getting their stories told. This channel is blowing up. The videos are blowing up. You guys are engaging, and I can't thank you enough. That means there's an audience for it. And I just want to make good content and celebrate Kentucky wrestling history like it should be. That's all we got. We'll see you guys on the mats.